Introduction. Dignity is a status that an individual possesses by virtue of having inherent worth. If a being has this status, they possess moral rights. However, dignity has come under fire recently for its purported exclusion of non-human animals, here on animals, and many human individuals such as infants and people with severe cognitive impairments. This is because dignity is traditionally grounded in a single capacity that most, not all humans, and only some animals possess, such as rationality. This is not only inconsistent with a presumed commitment to upholding the rights of all humans, but it also undermines the rights of animals. This article, that's wait, this article argues that to successfully overcome this problem of exclusion, we should adopt an account of sentient dignity, i.e., an account of dignity based on sentience alone, where sentience is understood as the capacity for subjective experience. Although the notion that animals possess dignity is receiving increasing philosophical, legal, and public attention, few theorists have explicitly argued that sentience should be its fundamental basis, and many do not directly defend an account of its basis at all. This is despite the fact that the capacity for sentience is often understood as a morally relevant capacity, used as a justification for extending a wide number of ethical considerations to animals. Grounding dignity in sentience alone means ensuring its traditional basis in rationality or another uniquely human capacity. Some thinkers may worry that this undermines dignity. However, an account of sentience dignity is not only the most plausible way to overcome the problem of exclusion, but it also maintains the distinct benefits that come with adopting a dignitarian approach. Namely, it vindicates the unique normative function of dignity, renders socio-political discourse philosophically coherent, and harnesses the dignity strategic benefits. To demonstrate this, this article examines one prominent pluralist solution to the problem of exclusion defended by Paulo Gilbert. To include all humans and most, if not all, animals, Gilbert extends the number of valuable capacities at the basis of dignity beyond rationality to include empathy, cooperation, aesthetic appreciation, and even sentience, among others. While Gilbert's account has many independent merits, it faces at least three problems in virtue of pluralism. It risks overinflating the scope of dignity, since several entities other than humans and animals, such as plants and supercomputers, may be counterintuitively included as bearers. Two, it creates intractable complexity when compared with the weight of dignity based rights, because there are several foundational grounds for those rights. And three, it introduces problematic moral distinctions between different bearers of dignity, because not all dignity bearers possess all the valuable capacities at the basis of dignity. Perry, number three. In contrast, an account of sentience dignity, this is one which is based solely on sentience, avoids all three of these problems, since sentience is the capacity for subjective experience, and since humans and many, if not all, animals have subjective experience, an account of sentience dignity includes humans and many, if not all, animals. Furthermore, it can account for a variety of different capacities by interpreting their moral relevance and comparing their relative moral weight in terms of sentience. Finally, since sentience dignity is based on a single capacity, it does not introduce problematic moral distinctions. All dignity bearers have the same kind of status. The upshot is that to plausibly overcome the problem of exclusion, we ought to avoid advocate for sentience dignity. As the article will show, an account of sentience dignity maintains coherence with standard views about what makes dignity a valuable and important approach to theorizing about rights in the first place, including providing desirable depths and structural functions that are needed to frame a human rights discourse. Dignity is a unique status that, inform us who the relevant right bearers are, helps to make sense of why interest generates rights, and explain how they do so. As such, it is also the foundation for a holistic approach to addressing the practical and theoretical normative issues, one which leads our lens philosophical coherence to the socio-political discourse about human rights. Finally, by focusing on a valuable capacity we have in common with other bearers of dignity, despite our differences, sentient dignity can bridge both cultural and species divides. It can therefore harness the potential strategic value of dignity by breaking down objectionable human animal distinctions and promoting animal rights. The article proceeds in three steps. First, it outlines the concept of dignity and the problem of exclusion in greater detail, alongside an overview of how exactly Gilbert attempts to overcome this problem. Second, it exposes the three problems faced by a pluralist solution, the problem of exclusion, and in doing so reveal how and why an account of dignity based on sentience alone can overcome these problems. Third, it argues that sentience dignity vindicates the unique philosophical strategy or strategic value of dignity. In other words, sentient dignity can lead to the plausible inclusion of all sentient humans and animals within a dignity based rights framework. The article concludes with some brief reflections on implications, most notably, sentient dignity form a stable and robust strategic platform for a broad coalition in support of humans and animal rights. Okay. Um when they say almost all animals, I hope they don't include, let's say, shrimps, and maybe shrimps. Of course shrimps are sentient, I guess. But I don't like, I don't know, the problem of exclusion. I should record. I need to add more arguments to the tier list. Okay, I'll record this part. For the 9 days has passed and I haven't added an argument. That's bad. While several philosophers have pointed out the exclusionary nature of normative theory in general, there are good reasons why exclusionary worry especially applies to dignity. Most prominently, another has argued that several theories of dignity implies human supremacism. According to these theories, whose contemporary companions include Kateb 2011 and Waldrop 2012, a core component of human dignity is our radical difference from a superiority over animals. To see why we need a more specific understanding of dignity, while there are numerous definitions in the contemporary literature, this article focuses on dignity as a deontic or right-based status that signals its bearers inherent worth and the existence of particularly robust claims and the universal duties towards them. In this sense, dignity is a kind of moral status. While the notion of moral status captures a range of normative positions, reliance on the notion of dignity signifies commitment to a particular substantive account. The notion of dignity is an anchoring idea within a holistic conceptual network for approaching the theory and practice of human rights. 3 of the structural components of Gilbert's account demonstrate the role of dignity in that network. Status dignity. A has status of dignity if A possesses P, a morally valuable property or set of properties that are the basis of dignity. If a being possesses P, they have inherent value, and so they have this status. Dignity based rights, there are certain rights are about how A ought to be treated, the that are respective are responsive to P and justify with reference to P. Next is conditional dignity. An experiences a conditional condition of dignity if A status dignity is protected, respected, such that A is treated with accordance with R. Okay. The problem of exclusion holds that theories of dignity tend to be objectionable exclude animals, and they often also objectively exclude many humans lacking certain capacities, such as rationality. This is because if an exclusionary property, such as rationality, grounds dignity, this implies that animals, and many humans that lack the relevant property lack inherent value and so lack dignity. If this were true, it would also follow that animals and also some humans lack rights. This conflicts with the recognition of animals as bearers of inherent worth and supervening rights. Kyle Kim Lika 2018 is not alone in advancing this objection. Wazello 2017, Afasel 2019 argue that dignity is often understood as a form of species aristocracy, aristocracy. This form of speciesism has its origin in an unjustified in group out group tribalism. Given or shared similarity, drawing a line between humans and animals in this way is arbitrary. Indeed, there may be no valuable capacity that can set humans apart from other animals, especially not in a way that meaningfully includes nearly all and only humans. Arguably followed even if the relevant capacity is understood in modal terms. The problem of exclusion therefore has a real force against traditional theories of dignity. Assuming that this challenge is correct, we should either reject dignity entirely in support for an alternative account of rights or develop an account of dignity and rights that include all human beings and most, if not all, animals. This article opts for the second route. While there are several accounts of right and not based on dignity, these lack the benefits that come with adopting the dignitarian approach. Importantly, they lack the unique philosophical strategic value of dignity, and so they are unable to make sense of or guide and shape discourse surrounding dignity and human rights by proving it with explanatory depth and rendering it philosophically coherent. As the final part of this article argues in the further depth, dignity avoids charges of redundancy even when extended to animals. For starters, dignity is a philosophically distinct concept that captures the unique status of its bearers, helping to bridge the gap between interest and rights. Indeed, dignity is an anchoring idea that signals a holistic structural approach to the theory and practice of human rights. Second, dignity is relevant and necessary because its potential strategic value, using the word dignity, adds rhetorical flourish to announcements or reminders of the right status of individuals and pulls on or psychological tendencies to favor in-group members. Indeed, the term has significant and weight in public discourse, and it is widely used in international human rights laws and as inter in interstitial what con interstellar initial. I don't know. I'll look that up. New word acquired. Interstitial. Interstitial. Of forming or occupying interstitics. I don't know what that is. Interstice. An intervening space, especially a small one. Sunshine filters through the Okay, so small space. Laws as small space concept that helps to bridge cultural differences. I guess I don't know. By conforming to the contemporary usage, we increase the relevance of philosophical understanding of rights and can deploy dignity, potential strategic value in support of animal inclusion in social, political, and legal contexts. Rather than rejecting dignity, we should rely on a more inclusive account that renders dignity more coherent and plausible. One that means that benefits. One that maintains the benefits above but does not focus on humanity alone. It is exactly such an account that Gilbert has attempted to deliver. Crucially, Gilbert argues that we should be pluralist about the basis for status dignity rather than ensuing rationality. Gilbert suggests that we should look beyond rationality and extend the list of favorable capacities that ground dignity to include creativity, sentience, empathy, cooperation, aesthetic appreciation, and a range of capacities for practical, technical, and moral reasoning. Among others, in Gilbert's view, possessing one of these valuable capacities is sufficient for the possession of status dignity. If successful, this plurist move would overcome the problem of exclusion. All humans and animals traditionally excluded from possessing dignity can be included as bearers of dignity, assuming they have at least one of the valuable capacities at the basis. We, moral agents, have duties to treat them in line with moral rights that are responsive to those capacities. For instance, we should ensure they have time and opportunity to cooperate with one another. If we do so, then individuals enjoy condition dignity. Three virtues of sentient dignity. Despite its appeal, a pluralist view on the basis of dignity faces three problems. An account based on dignity alone does not. Pluralism, one, overinflates the scope of dignity. Two, generates intractable, if not unworkable, complexity in underlying capacities at the basis. And three, results in problematic moral distinctions between individuals who do and do not have certain valuable capacities. This section outlines three problems and argues that avoiding each of them is a virtue of an account of sentience, dignity. That is, an account of dignity based on sentience alone. Examining Gilbert's pluralist account helps us to see why the most plausible solution to the problem of exclusion is the ground of dignity solely in sentience. However, Gilbert's view has several independent merits. While the argument below critiques it, they do not undermine the overall structure of his account. On the contrary, the article relies on the other components of Gilbert's view down the line. To begin, a brief definition of sentience is needed. Sentience is the capacity for subjective experience. While some accounts of sentience focus on pleasure and pain alone, bearers of sentience such as dogs, pigs, fishes, birds, and of course humans experience a wide array of affective or evolutive states. Sentience should therefore be understood as comprising the capacity to experience a range of modifiable mental states rather than solely pleasure and pain, such as contentment, boredom, grief, affection, and even simply the sensation in one's toes. Uh, Several other theories also adopt this more plausible and capacious understanding. With this working definition in hand, let us turn to the three problems faced by pluralism. Oh, wait. Mm. Mm. I don't know. This definition. Sentience should therefore be understood as comprising the capacity to experience a range of modifiable mental states. Okay, I can agree. There's a problem though. Rather than solely pleasure and pain, I definitely agree. I think even categorizing sentience as just pleasure and pain is a straw man. I agree then. Such as contentment, but I don't know. This is what I said. Okay, so I said such as contentment. I need to look at what contentment is. I don't know. I might maybe they mean contempt. I don't know. I don't even think animals can have well they should no they can. Because contentment just means, from what I can recall, contempt is an emotion on its own, which is like it's when it's a globalized emotion that disregards someone for who they are. Um, because maybe, let's say there's a coworker who comes to work late every morning and they do a poor job at work. If you have a global because contempt's a globalized emotion, you regard this figure or person to be not worth your time, in a way that you ignore them completely and you just ignore their whole existence. And usually, contempt is connected with emotions of hate or something like that. But I'm sure I'm gonna be wrong. Oh my god, I'm completely wrong. A state of happiness and satisfaction. Okay, I'll take the L on that. I tried to figure out if I knew the word, but I didn't. So rather than wait, I'm confused. Wait, a state of happiness or satisfaction. Yes, one can be content yet not happy. Contentment and happiness are related but distinct emotional states. Contentment generally refers to a state of satisfaction or acceptance with what one has or their current situation. It involves a sense of peace and stability, even in the absence of joy or excitement. That's pretty cool. Okay, boredom. Okay, grief, affection, and even simply the sensation in one's toes. Maybe I'm confused. Maybe what if they only have the ability to experience boredom? Well, if you can experience boredom, then you have the ability for for effective and evolutive states. Haha, I just copied that from above. And even simply the sensation in one's toes. Okay, what? You can feel the sensations in your toes? I guess you can experience your toes moving about. Several other theorists have adopted more plausible and capacious understanding. With this working different definition in hand, let us turn to the three problems faced by pluralism. Scope. I've never seen this font before. In the first problem with the scope of dignity, Gilbert offers a list of intuitively valuable capacities, sentience, self-awareness, empathy, cooperation by surveying the world to see what entities in it have valuable capacities given rise to status dignity. While this is a plausible start, it's not the whole story. The second step is justifiable. Determine who is and who is not a dignity bearer requires us to examine which entities possess the valuable capacities. We identify and to rule out many capacities as sufficient basis for dignity, especially if they result incoherent down the line. Depending on which capacities from the basis of dignity, a pluralist account can result in incoherence in the form of inflation. Before examining why it is important to acknowledge that Gilbert recognizes that the valuable capacities at the basis of dignity are an initial list that we should see as an open to various forms of evidentiary support and epistemic improvement. In other words, Gilbert expresses an openness to his view being revised. With this in mind, recall that the guided motivation behind the problem of exclusion is the moral undesirability of excluding animals and some humans from an account of dignity. However, we not only have convictions about who ought to be included, but who ought to be excluded. Pluralism can result in a conflict with these intuitions. To see, we now run to a simple test. If any given being only has one set of valuable capacity at the basis of pluralistic conception of dignity and none of the others, then would we still want to conclude that they possess dignity? For example, it is conceivable that the supercomputer HAL from 2001, A Space Odyssey, I swear, didn't the author of this bring up this exact point in his other paper? Why sentience should be the only basis of moral status. He brought this exact, nothing wrong with that. He brought this exact one up for when he was talking about rational agency or agency, and that if agency is not derivative of sentience, then you can lead to conclusions like this. Okay, I see. I see. Could engage in a technical, prudential, and moral reasoning. A space odyssey. Okay, prudential, moral reasoning. They could plausibly engage in prudential. Yeah, they could. But what prudential? Wouldn't this then wait if they could wait? Doesn't prudential also imply some sort of well-being that one can look out for something that is good for them or good for their own good. Like let's say you have button one, which lowers your well-being level or at least harms you. Under prudential reasoning, it would be the case that you choose button two or don't click the button one at all in order to preserve your well-being. But wouldn't say technical prudential would just mean well-being. But I mean, how can a supercomputer have well-being? I don't know. And moral reasoning. Maybe I'm thinking, maybe I need to fully understand the term prudential then. Maybe it doesn't fully imply some sort. Well, when I mean good, I don't mean that this thing has to be good for you in the sense of morally good for you. It just has to be good for you in the sense of whatever you deem good or whatever you value, etc., etc. But supercomputers do not seem to be the kind of being that strike us as possessing dignity, since a being that can only engage in reasoning would lack their own ends. They would have none of their own interest. Okay, that's right. I agree. They would not experience satisfaction when the things they reason towards are achieved or obstructed. So I guess desire satisfactionism. Well, no, wait. Desire satisfactionism isn't just about having a desire and satisfying or having it frustrated, but being an entity that can generate desires in the first place. Okay. As such, it is not clear we can violate their rights. To be sure, this is a point that Gilbert also expresses concern for. He notes that the capacity for theoretical knowledge might appear relevant only when associated with the capacity for qualitative experience or for practical agency or striving. In other words, Gilbert appears to share the worry about over inclusion and that responding to this worry might require us to impose necessary limits on the possession of dignity. For a different example, consider cooperation. Many plants engage in cooperative joint activities with others for common ends. For example, trees share nutrient through fungal networks, but plants do not tend to strike us as dignity bearers. It seems implausible to think they have an inherent value that is independent of our valuing them, one which can ground a form of direct moral status such as dignity. Including plants as dignity bearers would therefore be inapt or even undermine the claim that sentient animals have dignity. Again, it may be that Gilbert's view can accommodate a critique of this sort if we adopt a more specific understanding of what counts as cooperation. Example, Gilbert may have in mind cooperation involving intentional actions for the benefit of sentient beings. As before at this point, towards the idea capacity such as sentience might be necessary for dignity. This might give rise to an immediate objection. Even if we have the intuition that plants and supercomputers do not have dignity, many people also hold intuition that cows, rats, and fish do not as well. Why should we give justificatory, justificatory, justif, justif, justificatory? What is going on? Why can't I pronounce this? Justif. Oh, there's a tiff in that. Oh my god. Okay, justificatory. Oh my god, bro. Oh, I got it right. Just justificatory weight to some intuitions about who ought to be excluded from an account of dignity and not others. To answer this question, an important clarification is needed. Reaching justificatory coherence is not about giving under unexamined weight to what? Beliefs we already have. Convictions about particular cases act as provisional judgment points for determining whether any particular conception of dignity is correct. If we have an intuition that some individuals or entities do not have the dignity, we ought to investigate the intuition to see if there's any coherence, well justified reason for holding it. However, we find that there is no such reason, then we ought to reject the intuition. This is interesting information. If we have an intuition that some individual entities have dignity, we ought to investigate the intuition to see if there's a moral current. Well, just well, I'll highlight that. Hmm, that's interesting. However, if we find that there's no such reason, then we ought to reject that intuition. In other words, what counts as a good reasoning for giving an intuition justifactory weight is largely determined by wide reflective equilibrium with other principles and convictions. If someone holds the intuition that animals should be excluded from an account of dignity, then this intuition ought to be rejected because it follows from specious ideas as opposed to a well considered theoretical position, as outlined in the previous section. This is an instance in which a conviction ought to be revised if being if and provide even because it is poorly justified and incoherent with other beliefs. In contrast, the intuition that we ought to exclude plants and supercomputers from an account of dignity can be coherently and plausibly justified. To see this, consider the example of plants again. Imagine that someone has the intuition that ancient red cedars should be. Again, he brings up cedar trees, ancient red cedar trees from his other paper too. I think from the other paper when he brought these up, he said that um cedar trees can be valuable in how their aesthetic um can be valuable in some sense, but they're only valuable, let's say, uh in respects to sentient beings, in that they give sentient beings, let's say, ear, aesthetic pleasures, etc. They have instrumental value from what I can recall. Maybe I'm wrong on that when it comes to recalling his prior article. And because this tree has these instrumental values towards sentient beings, be the case that you shouldn't destroy. I'm butchering this idea. I'm gonna have to read that article again. No, I'll just look for it right now. There's no point in trying to in mischaracterizing what he probably said. I can see. I found the paper. Let's go. Okay, where's the paper? Why? Okay, there you go. And it should be cedar. To list, oh, say there you go. To illustrate, consider ancient red cedar trees. We might, we might have certain active interests in these trees to get some fresh air, or to experience some moment of joy or being in their presence, but to achieve full account of their moral value, it seems more accurate to say the kind of value we associate with them is independent of what we want or need to get from these things. Instead, we simply admire and appreciate their beauty, size, complexity. When we do so, we appreciate and admire these things for their own sake. Hmm. Oh, okay. I'll highlight that. For their own sake. we When we engage in these forms of valuing, we might have emotional responses, hold certain beliefs or judgments about the entity or certain action. However, none of these involve a desire that the entity contributes something else, as instrumental valuing requires. Okay, I was kind of right, I guess. I'll ask for an explanation. Okay, what does own sake mean here? In the passage, for their own sake means that the trees are valuable intrinsically, not instrumentally. Okay. Instrumental value when you have something because it helps you get something else you want. Example, you value red cedar trees because it gives you oxygen. It's useful to you. Intrinsic own sake value when you value something simply for what it is, not because what it gives you or leaves. You admire a tree's beauty, age, grandeur just because those qualities are beautiful or are inspiring in themselves, not because they benefit you. So what the text is saying is we admire and appreciate their beauty for their own sakes. It means we see the trees as having worth or deserving appreciation in themselves as a tool for achieving our goals. And this difference between saying, I love this tree because it makes me happy, instrumental, versus I love this tree because it's magnificent and ancient. Um hmm. Hmm. To see the strength of the derivative explanation of moral value, notice that it coheres with common sense intuition that certain non-sentient organic entities have significant moral value but lack moral status. This allows us to develop comprehensive So if ancient reds are valuable derivatively in virtue of their features that give rise to them being valuable, aesthetic characteristics, blah blah, we ought to generally respect. I give the rest. I need a proper explanation. Excellent. You pulled a dense quote critical by Matthew. Perry is explaining how saintism, the view that saints alone grounds morality, our moral status, and can extend blah blah. Derivative versus direct moral status. Direct fundamental moral status belong to beings who can experience things, pleasure, pain, etc. Example, dogs and pigs. Derivative moral value belongs to the things we value because of their relation to sentient life or the kinds of value and experience we can have towards them. A tree, coral reef, Mona Lisa, they don't have experiences, but they can still be objects of moral attention or respect because how sentience being relate to them, aesthetic appreciation, ecology, and dependence on culture. So when we admire ancient trees for their own sake, that feeling of reverence is real, but Perry says that the moral weight derives from the value, experience, and capacities of sentient beings. In short, trees matter because of how their existence and features matter to sentient creatures. Okay. Sentience counters everything on root capacity. Even though we protect trees for the reason we should do it is ultimate because the value of sentient means blah blah blah. Does this mean trees have moral status? No, not directly. Perry exactly says non-sentient organic entities have significant moral value, but not direct moral status. This means trees can be morally important. We have reason to preserve them, but they are not moral patients. They cannot be wronged or harmed in the moral sense. The value of trees is derivatively final. We appreciate them for their own sakes, aesthetically and symbolically, yet they capture attention depends on sentient minds. Direct means that can be wronged or harmed. Sentient derivative final value. Non-sentient things we can admire or protect because of how sentient means relate to them. Indian trees have moral value, but no independent moral status. Their value derives from the importance they have for our two sentient means. We protect trees not because they can suffer, but because they are beautiful, ecological role, meaningful to those who can. When Perry talks about for their own sake, he says we can experience them intrinsically beautiful. We can experience them as intrinsically beautiful, but the moral weight of that appreciation still traces back to sentient experiences. Okay, I understand. I was kinda right. Just kidding. I was kinda right. I wasn't too off. I guess I call it instrumental when they said no. I think I was kinda right. I was kinda right. Whatever we find there's no such reason, then we ought to reject the intuition. In other words, what accounts as a good reason for given an intuition justificatory weight is largely determined by a wide reflective equilibrium with other principles and convictions. I bid if someone holds the intuition that animals should be excluded from an account of dignity, then this intuition ought to be rejected because it follows from the species idea as opposed to a well considered theoretical position as outlined in the previous section. This is an instance in which a conviction ought to be revised if and because it's poorly justified and incoherent with other beliefs, in contrast with the intuition that we ought to exclude plant supercomputers from an account of dignity can be coherent and plausibly justified. To see this, consider an example of plants. Imagine that someone has the intuition that ancient cedar trees should be included as dignity bearers. How should we explain this intuition? Perhaps in light of their age and magnitude, these entities may have significant moral and aesthetic value, but this does not coherently imply they have dignity for at least two reasons. First, extending dignity to these entities introduces a problem that it resolves. This includes the problem that we should explain below, that we will explain below, or something like that. As gestured above, dignity also an inapt notion to assign to non-sentient living beings because dignity is possessed solely by entities which have inherent value. Ancient red cedar trees may have immense instrumental or extrinsic value, and they may even hold this value as ends in themselves. However, this value is best explained by the fact that they are valued to sentient beings, whether directly or indirectly, not as inherent properties. Second, a separate notion that of indirect moral status is sufficient account for the weighty moral consideration we owe them. Indirect moral status. I gotta highlight that. Uh, okay. According to this idea, the moral status of ancient red cedar trees derives from the value they have to sentient beings. It follows that we need not give justifactory weight to the intuition about excluding animals, even if we ought to weigh to other intuitions about exclusion. However, why should we think that including sentient beings as necessary for dignity will match our intuition? We can be certain that an account based on sentience will include within the scope of dignity almost all humans as well as most, if not all mammals and birds, and the scientific consensus that these animals are most probably sentient. What more, using sentience as a scope likely means including all vertebrates at a minimum, including fishes, reptiles, fishes and reptiles, as well as at least invertebrates such as an octopus. These beings are likely already strike us with plausible dignity bearers. However, things become more nuanced when we turn again to our credible intuitions and exclusions. A sentience-based approach very clearly rules out supercomputers and plants. View entertain the idea that supercomputers are currently sentient, and the idea that plants are sentient has been debunked on modern myth. Uh, Mattel et al. 2001 that ought not be precautionary concern. Nonetheless, this is the largely gray area between these cases and the clearest candidate of sentience, such as mammals. This gray area includes invertebrates such as crabs, insects, and worms. The problem here is not only that we lack evidence about which beings are sentient, but also that we lack confidence in our own evaluation to grapple with this. Bridge has proposed that we shift the language of candidature away from any onus uncertainty. This involves adopting a theory light perspective according to which we search for markers of sentience instead of aiming to discover clear cut evidence. Um ooh um do I disagree with this? I think I disagree with this. Uh, Maybe I don't understand what they're saying. I'll look into it. We search for markers of sentience. Uh, ooh, wait. The passage comes from a discussion about uncertain and identifying sentience and actually does have the implication for an abortion debate through that indirectly. While the passage is saying in plain terms that there are beings like crabs, worms, where scientists aren't sure whether they are sentient, able to feel or experience consciousness, the other side in Bridge says instead of insisting on certainty, we must prove they are sentient. We should talk about candidacy, candidacy, candidate, candidates for sentience. Meaning we should treat as if they might be sentient because there are some indicators they could be. This is the theory light approach. We do not need a full theory of consciousness. We just look for markers of sentience. Um, bro. When in doubt, sentience are on the side of caution. Oh, brother. This applies to an abortion in context of fetal moral status. This logic maps directly onto the core dispute between Satanism and pro-life pluralist. Satanism says moral status begins with sentient beings. Beginning begins to sentience begins. I think they made a mistake. It probably mean beings, and this is just a typo. When the fetus gains the capacity for consciousness, usually around the late mid 20 and late blah, 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 depending on how you follow. But since it's hard to pinpoint exactly when Satan start a candidate approach per se, what we concern the fetus is sentient, there's possible indicators we should treat it with moral caution, not necessarily as full moral subjects, but as potential. That doesn't automatically outlaw abortion, but it shifts the ethical discussion to a degree of moral risk. Mm, mm, mm. Pluralist have multiple grounds, etc. Human potential rationality with capacity for consciousness, so they say we're sentient. So perspective candidacy is a concept reinforce the idea we should wait for. We should. Sentience reply candidacy for sentience is a good epistemic rule. It helps us navigate uncertainty, but it doesn't change what it grounds moral status capacity for experience itself. So before sentience, no direct moral status, though possibly some derivative precautionary value. After sentience, direct moral status. Okay, I understand. In summary, candidature being with sentience, I would take ethical precaution just in case fetus is have before a confirmed sentient might deserve some moral caution, not none. Theory-light approach, don't wait for absolute proof of consciousness, look for biological or behavioral indicators, avoid moral riskiness about borderline stages of development. Sentient takeaways, moral status will begin with actual sentience, but uncertainly invited prudence. Um, isn't prudence, prudence just means what is best for someone, from what I know. So it is is for you for under prudence, it would be better not to smoke, something like that. Abortion before clear sentience may be permissible, but after or near it, more morally serious. The caricature idea doesn't prove early abortion is wrong. It argues that uncertainty about sentience might affect fetal cautionary. Okay, I said actually I've read about a similar idea before in another book. It's called um it's okay, Saint The Edge of Sentience, Risk and Precaution in Humans. Oh, it's by Bridge. I did not know. That's embarrassing. I did not know. I only read the part on human brain and the part I never looked at the who wrote this book. I just saw that Nathan Nobis talked about the book, and I got the book and I just looked at only the three chapters: people with disorders of consciousness, fetuses and embryos, and neural organoids. Those are the only things I looked at. I did not know it was the guy called Bridge. Yeah, in this book, it talks about some taking some precaution that there before sentience there might be people considered sentient patients or something like that. Whereby there should be precaution that before going about doing something that they might be sentient or there's a chance that they are sentient, stuff like that. Precautionary. Um, mm, I think he was talking about MSC negative, minimally conscious subjects. I don't know. I don't want to butcher that. So I'm actually no. I'll just so MC negative, MSC negative. So it was when someone shows little signs of being conscious. It's almost as if they're in some sort of state of PBS, um, but really they are somewhat minimally conscious, but it's that they're not showing signs. But it did the book did talk about PETs, fMRIs, no, not like fMRI. Then he talked about MRI. Then he talked about electroencephalogram. Then he talked about, I think that's it. When it comes to how to detect if someone is sentient, these are like more definitive ways. They said that people who, let's say doctors, not doctors, but people who just look at behavior have a 40 something percent chance of misdiagnosing the condition. So you have to be more cautious when it comes to these individuals. I understand. Okay. Okay. This gray area includes invertebrates such as crabs, insects, worms. The problem here is not only that we lack evidence about which beings are sentient, but also here is not only we lack which beings are sentient, but also we lack confidence in our own evaluations. Okay. To grapple with this, Bridge has proposed that we shift the language of caricature away from any honest uncertainty. This involves adopting a theory line perspective, uh, according to which we search for markers of sentience instead of aiming to discover clear cut evidence. Often, rather than attempting to draw clear lines, we should embrace the reasonable zones of disagreement that this gives rise to and develop precautionary policies and regulations. For instance, consider insects. The consensus is that there is at least realistic possibility of conscious experience in some insects. Andrew at blah blah 2024. If true, it may be right to think of some insects as having a dignity. However, this implication need not lead to objectionable conflicts with our own intuitions if we incorporate a sensitivity to this gray area into any practical legal or public policy regulation. These should require us to be open to latest research on which beings are likely to be sentient candidates, thereby helping to determine more accurately which beings are bearers are non-bearers of dignity. Furthermore, regulations should be sensitive to the risk of overall as well as under inclusion. In this sense, it's not only our intuition that makes something be provisional or evaluation of what counts as kind of sentience like ground dignity may need adjusting as we learn more. Reflective equilibrium is an inter interactive what word is this? I've never seen this one. What's this? Iterative, related or involved in iteration. Okay, I know what iteration is, but I didn't know what iterative, blah, blah, blah. Thank you, Bob. It allows us to embrace the serious doubts that we start to feel when we start thinking about dignity of some entities, one way or the other, such as bees or grasshoppers. If including some entities is too counterintuitive, incoherent, or implausible, we might make minor adjustments to our understanding of what degree or kind of sentience grounds dignity. As mentioned, the uncertainty here speaks against sharp lines, so much like Gilbert notes about his own account. The basis of sentient dignity should also be open to epistemic improvement. An account of sentient dignity can capture this. It's unequivocally include the clearest candidate while integrating sensitivity to those at the margins. Um, Adopting sentience as the sole basis for dignity, therefore, it allows us to ensure adequate inclusions while implementing the best approach to avoiding counterintuitive overinflation. Wait. I was watching this vegan uh live stream and he was asked if he eats seafood like let's say crabs or bugs or something like that. They said no. I thought there's another dude. I hate when there's another there's a woman philosopher who made okay book of Job. What's her name? Naz? No, it's not Naz. Bro. No, it's Naz. Naz Burnham. She does Martha Nussbaum. Boom. I can't pronounce that for my life. Martha, is it her? Is Martha? Maybe I'm getting something confused. No, Martha is not a vegan while she promotes animal rights. Her personal diet includes fish, dairy. Due to just the apparent conflict with her philosophy and diet and interviews, her diet in an interview stated, I eat a lot of plant based proteins and a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables, but I also eat a lot of yogurt for protein. I eat fish about twice to 3 weeks. The capacities approach, her ethical capacity approach argues that all sentient beings have rights to flourish in a way that's characteristic of their own species. A just society, she contends, is one that provides its members, both humans and animals, with basic opportunities to do so. Justified non-vegan food. Nussbaum's justification for her non-vegan choices is based on the idea that harm of killing depends on increased capacity for complex projects and plants. She argues that a fish, which seems to live mainly in the moment, are not harmed by a painless death, provided that they had a period of healthy activity. She also states that she is careful about sourcing her fish to ensure minimal harm. Critics view some animal rights advocates find her personal diet inconsistent with her broader philosophical framework. Yeah, I okay. So someone like uh, Martha, I can't pronounce Martha Nussbaum, Bum. Dude, I can't. Why am I struggling with pronunciation? Nussbaum. I'll just watch a video. Not, I said it right. What, Nussbaum? Okay, like bomb, Nussbaum. Okay, so when I hear it, like when I read the crab thing and the worms, under her view, you can eat a crab or fish from what I, or at least fishes or whatever, because they don't, they don't have complex plans or whatever, something like that. So I guess there's nuance. I guess okay. Well, I thought her view was a bit different. I guess because I remember an article, not an article, an interview, a short interview, like for 20 seconds. She did in 2023 or 2022 or maybe even 2021. I can't recall too properly. I just remember that it's gonna flash in my mind that I remember someone doing an interview, and they were supposedly, they're not, well, she's not vegan. She says she's not vegan, but she doesn't kill other animals. Let's say cats, dogs, cows, etc. Only fishes and so. But there might be another person who's probably coming to mind who only eats. Oh yeah, it's her. It's probably her. What am I doing? Anyways, an account of sanctity and dignity can capture this it unequivocally to include the clearest candidates while integrating sensitivity to those on the margin. I wonder what they mean by sensitivity though. Adopting sentience as the sole basis for dignity therefore allows us to ensure adequate inclusion while implementing the best approach to avoid counterintuitive overinflation. One final thought may be that not all valuable capacities are at the basis of pluralistic accounts of dignity will result in overinflation. For instance, if bearers of sentience possess those capacities, in any case, while this is true, it's not clear why such capacities possess why such capacities must then play a role in ground in dignity. If base in dignity in sentience are to determine the scope of dignity, if what? If base in dignity in sentience already determine the scope of dignity. Okay, I understand. They include an additional capacity will be redundant. This guy, I like the thought. I keeps using the word redundant. I like that. This is redundant. Yeah, pluralism is redundant. It keeps. If I key search redundant in his prior article, I bet it will come up like 5 to 12 times at least. Redundant. Uh, Okay, I'll give him a break. It only comes up 7 times, so I only say it's redundant 7 times in the other article. I'll add this, so it's okay. Where am I? On inflation, one final thought: dignity. If base and dignity in sentience are determined the scope of dignity, then including additional capacities will be redundant, and as we will see below, it produces additional problems for theorizing about dignity and rights. In contrast, if it is sentience alone, which is at the heart of what it means to possess dignity, and we can overcome the problem of exclusion while easily avoiding overinflation. Complexity. The second problem is that pluralism cannot straightforwardly account for internal complexity without running into the challenge in question about how to weigh up different capacities at the basis of dignity. As Gilbert notes, dignity based rights must account for complex connections between different capacities and individuals might have. To achieve this, Gilbert stipulates that some capacities may well constrain other capacities when we specify the right individuals have. This targets an important consideration about balancing competing interests. For instance, oh my god, uh, okay, I need to read that over again. That's complexity. The second problem is that pluralism cannot straightforwardly account for the internal complexity without running into challenges and questioning how to weigh up different capacities at the basis of dignity. As Gilbert noted, dignity-based rights must account for the complex connection between different capacities and individuals to have. To achieve this, Gilbert stipulates that some capacities may well constrain other capacities when we specify the right individuals have. This targets an important consideration about balance and competing interests. For instance, we should not always impose decisions about that would be objectively good for someone's capacities in one respect example because it increases opportunity for cooperation since this may fail to be responsive to their capacities in other respects. I think I keep on going back to the other article, but um sorry, I don't want to mispronounce his name. I'll even scroll up to get it. All right, Matthew. I'll call him Perry because Perry the platypus, like that. Perry, he brings up something close to this. Um, he brings Let me, bro. Why can't? Why did you just forget for a second? Where am I? Let me read that again. I think maybe it's. Oh yeah, yeah. He brings up forcing people to do things what that's good for them could be parental. Maybe I'm reading maybe wrong article. No, you should. It would be right article. No, or someone else brought it up. That it could be parentalistic in the sense that you are constraining someone's self-governance. I think I don't know if he brought that up in the last article. I'll key search that in the last article. Governance. What about par par paternalistic? Oh, you did bring it up. We resist parentalism even if they pursue what would be objectively bad for their welfare because respect of their self-governance. This is an instance, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I understand. We're in the good spot. There you go. Give me a second. It's most likely going to take 3 hours to finish this whole article. If it took 9 pages, if 9 pages took 1 hour, then I'm gonna take like 3 or some hours, but I don't think that this whole thing has been me reading. If I just focus on just reading, like I'd probably get through this in 1 more hour, but I'll be back. Okay. Okay. I am back. Complexities. The second problem is that pluralism cannot straightforwardly account for the internal complexity without running into challenging questions about how to weigh up different capacities at the basis of dignity. As Gilbert notes, dignity based rights must account for the complexity connections between different uh, capacities, capacities an individual might have. To achieve this, Gilbert stipulates that some capacities may well constrain other capacities, and we specify the rights individuals have. This targets an important consideration about balancing competing interests. For instance, we should not always impose decisions that would objectively good for someone. Capacities in one respect, example, because it increases the opportunity for cooperation, since this may fail to be responsive to their capacities in another respect because it disregards their rational choices. In accommodating this seems necessary for accounting for dignity to be plausible. However, comparison requires a standard against which we can determine which options win out. For instance, if you are deciding whether to admit person A or person B into a university, you should use their grades as a basis for comparison. In contrast, if we face a conflict over whether to promote or respect one's valuable capacity over the other, and a pluralist account of the basis of dignity, it's not clear what metrics we should use to make this decision, precisely because the basis for dignity is morally fundamental in determining rights in the first place. Recall that this is because dignity based rights are responsive to the basis of dignity, hence, a challenge of incommensurability arises. For instance, if we must decide whether to prioritize a responsiveness to your capacity for empathy or your capacity for rationality, then in any given context, we have no means to work out which one would win out because both are morally fundamental. This question might be answered with four further principles that assign different weights to the capacities at the basis of dignity. However, we do not face these problems in the first place on the sentience dignity account because an individual's sentience, in other words, their experiences of subjective mental states, form the background against which we can make comparisons. The basis of dignity in this case, sentience, is what rights are responsive to. To account for this, bro, I just had a random idea. I need to shut up. No, I just have to shut. No, I gotta say it. This, I'm just reading about dignity, mental state, subjective stuff. I just this one stupid this one. I don't know if it's a reductio, but where it's like, what if someone went through a teletransporter and it destroyed their destroyed them, uh. It recreated them atom by atom, but it would be the case that this newly created body has never been conscious. Would it be okay to grade this body? Oh my god, dude. Dude, I don't know. Sometimes I wish there would be a paper that addresses that. I've seen this. Perry addresses the dog versus human thing, which is great. I wish there's a way to address the that one. It's, the basis of dignity, in this case, sentience is what gives rise rights are responsive to account for the complexity in rights individuals have. We should understand the value of various capacities individuals possess via their sentience. For instance, you have rights to your agency respected because your agency is valuable in virtue of you having positive subjective experience when your agency is respected. Example, because you appreciate what your agency can do for you. Because of this, we can compare which rights of an individual should take priority by comparing whether the priorities prioritizing one capacity or another with reference to those capacities sentience based value. For instance, if we prioritize your capacity for agency over your capacity for aesthetic appreciation, we should do so because you're prioritizing your agency is more valuable according to your subjective experience about the potential or actual value of these capacities. Similarly, a dog's interest in he's talked about this he's talked about this on in his paper again. I need to shut up. So what if he talks about this in the other paper? But but this the other people was talking about how in it you restricting um um some animals or people uh can be unfairly disadvantaged uh depending on what they deem what is valuable or uniquely valuable to them, in the sense that if used, make it so that a dog can no longer smell or doesn't have the chance to smell or use its olfactory whatever, then you are, I don't know if the paper said you're harming the dog, but at least you are you're going against what is what is valuable to them. So you're going against its interest. Something like that. Hopefully I'm right. Um, Similarly, what happened to my voice? Similarly, a dog's interest in smelling generates rights regarding their olfactory capacity because their olfactory capacity is valuable with reference to this capacity, direct or indirect impact on their sentience. We may sometimes prioritize their olfactory capacity over their capacity to play because sniffing things is more valuable to the dog in that moment. Notice that claiming this does not require us to claim that a sentient being others' capacities lack value. Instead, the point is that their value should be thought of as depending on and deriving from the capacity for sentience. This is crucial because it allows us to account for a range of important moral considerations. For instance, consider agency once more. Ideally, an account of sentient dignity ought to be able to make sense of why agency has value. Consider an example in which sentience appears to have little direct importance. Imagine that a person A is locked in a room against their will, and person B is free to go wherever they want, but both have equal welfare. Perhaps person A is currently unaware that they are trapped. B's situation seems more normatively preferable to A's, but this appears to be solely due to the difference in their agenital options. A genital. I know what a genital is. There's us in that one book from saving people. You have something called a genital harm. I know what a genital harm is, but I don't know what a genital is. Maybe agent. Maybe affecting some sort of past or affecting past. I know. I'm just gonna shut up and try to. I look it up. I'll look it up. There's no point. Maybe it means agents options. Could be that. At no point. I'll ask. Meaning of a genital option. A genital is one of those philosophical phrases that sound abstract but really just means a range of things an agent, a being capable of acting or choosing, can do. The root word agent in philosophy, an agent is any being that can make decisions, form intentions, and act on reasons. I don't know if I agree with that definition of agents, at least in the sense of form intentions, and act on reasoning. I mean, okay. I mean, from what I can recall from that one book on immortality, they say an agent can be, let's say, a thermostat, because a thermostat can have goals and complete those goals, etc., etc. I For this sake, okay, I need to stop looking stuff up. Should you in the book is called "Should You Die"? I swear that's what it. Thermos. Ther. Okay. Thermos. Wow, it's nothing showing. Oh, shut up. Okay. The debate is largely irrelevant for what I'm proposing. This is what the this thing says. Agency is not associated with free will, but instead with agents. And agents can be deterministic. For example, a thermostat can be described as an agent and at the same time be described without free will, as long as there are inputs, goals, and action space. There is an agent. This framework will be developed into 4.3. Oh, I guess this when inputs, goals, and action space. So humans are clear examples of moral agents. We can choose, deliberate, and act for reasons. Agenital means relating to agency. When something is an agenital, it has to do with our capacity for to act intentionally or exercise agency. That is to share the world through choices. A choice. So a genital option means the choice, actions, path that are open to an agent because their ability to decide. In other words, it's set of things you can do as moral or rational agent. It refers to the possibility for acting and grounded in your capacity for reason, desire, freedom, blah blah blah. If a paper says pluralist argues the person to have a higher moral sense because of their blah blah blah, agental options, it means humans are seen as morally significant because they have morally complex capacities for agency, like planning, promise, blah blah blah. This blah blah. Agent being intention, agential relating to agency or the power to act. Agential option, the different action choices available to an agent based on the rational power. Blah, blah, blah. Practical expressions. A dog has fewer agential options than a person. It can act, but not deliberately about justice or form long-term moral goals. Okay, okay. In this case, the most morally important factor is clearly freedom. But the reason why this factor is morally important can still be explained with reference to sentience. Freedom is valuable to sentient individuals who have the capacity for agency. This may be for prudential reasons. For instance, if A wanted to leave the room to pursue other things they value, they would not be able to. B options are wider, and having more options is generally an instrumentally good thing because having options is in our interest. Um, however, focus on sentience can also explain why our capacity for agency might be valuable for their own sake too, even if this follows for reasons that derive from sentience. Uh, like that he quotes himself. 730 to 732. Does that mean? Maybe line 7? I don't know what this means. Okay. The idea here is that we might prefer as B situation to A's, even if there is not instrumental benefit to B. For instance, it may be that we appreciate the range of options this make available, irrespective of whether we pursue those options. Despite this, the value of this capacity will still derives from the fact that we are sentient beings. It is because we have subjective experience of value in our agency that our agency is of value to us. It follows that even if sentience is not obviously the most morally important factor in any given context, it can still explain why other factors are morally important. One of the virtues of this way of approaching internal complexity is that it has considerable explanatory power across species, species differences. Consider fireworks that emit a loud bang. These impose a significant harm on other animals. A focus on sentience allows us to explain the magnitude and wider impacts of this on animals' other experiences. For instance, it may be precisely because many of these animals have much more sensitive hearing than humans, and that the harm should be considered a dignity-based right violation. What's more, loud fireworks may have damage blah 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 what damaging effects on pets fear. For some reason when I read, my eyes skip over the whole line of I was reading damaging, I skipped over the whole line of text and went to here. I don't know why. I don't know why that keeps happening. Maybe I'm not full tracking well. What's more, loud fireworks may have damaging effects on pets. fear responses down the line, independent of their initial harm, it might cause them fear responses. Interesting. I'm gonna highlight that. That's interesting. Okay. Independent of the initial harm, it might cause them. Similarly, fireworks can negatively affect migratory and reproductive behaviors of wild birds. Centurion sentience illuminates and helps us to understand these various wrongs. However, sentience-based theory may be valuable to similar problems to a similar problem to may be vulnerable. Oh my god, dude. To a similar problem to pluralism. Concerning internal complexity about dignity basis. This is because sentience in fact captures a range of smaller capacities. Example, to feel one. I knew this would be brought up. I was like, why should one feeling on toes? Example, to feel on toes, being tickled, to experience a persistent headache in one's back, or to experience love and heartache. There are a considerable number kind and intense intensity of various subjective experiences. The thought may therefore be that we have simply passed the buck on different dimensions of sentience. If the problem for pluralism was its inability to compare the relative weight of different capacities at the basis, that this problem also arises in comparisons of the various dimensions of sentience. Dun 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 dun. A sentience-based view clearly faces challenging questions here, but these do not undermine the theory based on sentience, because sentience should be thought of as a single unified capacity, even if it made up several constituent dimensions that vary in intensity, duration, and propinquity. Bro, I don't know. Proper iniquity? What? What? Um. Google, I need your help. Propinquity. First time hearing that word in my life. The state of being close to someone or something. Proximity. Propinquity. Propinquity. Perpinquity. 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 Instead of being close to someone or something, propinquity can mean physical proximity, a kinship between people. That's gotta be insane vocabulary. Like, imagine you're talking to someone or debating someone and say, the I don't know. Dude. Let's go again one more time. Propinquity. Propinquity. Ping. Ing. Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity?
Propinquity.
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 Oh my god, dude, why am I struggling with pronouncing this word? One more time.
Propinquity.
Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity. Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity. Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity.
Propinquity. I'm good. Okay. Where's that one app? Youglish. I'm gonna use Youglish. Do you hear people say this? Yeah. I'm struggling, man. Youglish. Youglish comes in clutch when I need to hear how people say words. Okay. How am I an English speaker, but I don't know how to say these words?
Well, the simple one is propinquity. Just
propinquity. There you go.
You know, when
propinquity, you could say, between
propinquity
will hardly convince anyone of the propinquity of
propinquity
the two.
implies social propinquity, as if a cemetery
social propinquity.
And it's what he called propinquity or remoteness, which we would
Propinquity.
Logical course, serendipity and propinquity can sometimes lead to great leaps in scientific knowledge. And so it was.
Propinquity. Okay, I think I have it down like 75%. Okay. Okay, propinquity and then fidelity. Oh my god, dude. Okay.
Fecundity.
Fecundity. Cunt? What? No, dude, what? The ability to produce abundance of offspring or new growth. What? Procundity.
Fecundity.
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 Fecundity. Okay, I got it down quick. Fecundity is the ability to produce a large number of offspring or new growth, and it has two main meanings: the potential reproductive capacity of an organism or population, and the intellectual or creative productivity of a mind. It can be measured by the number of eggs, seeds, or other offspring produced, or metaphorically by the amount of new ideas a person creates. I have a fecundity. My fecundity is so high. The number of ideas I can generate is so high. Metaphorically. What am I doing? Anyways, propinquity, fecundity, purity, and so on. I don't know. I need a reason for why they added these two words. But no, I understand why they added the two words. Well, I guess totally. Among different subjective experiences may vary widely. These experiences share an objective structure, one which plausibly remains the same for all sentient beings. This follows even in unanswered questions remain about what particular beings' subjective experiences are like. What it is exactly like for a bat to be a bat. Consider an analogy with an object size is multidimensional because it's made up of the width, length, and depth, but this nonetheless makes size a unique characteristic of an object. The same is true of sentience. We observe that a particular being has sentience by looking for certain markers of sentience that are made up of their more discrete capacities, such as the functioning of their nervous system, their cognition, and certain behavioral characteristics. Okay, I'm gonna highlight this because this is important for what I've seen. Because maybe it can help explain the sensitivity precaution thing with worms, crabs, and other invertebrates. Wait, oh my god, am I stupid? Is a crab bro, I'm doubting myself. Is a crab is a crab an invertebrate? Oh my god. Oh, please don't say I look dumb. And oh my god, please. Yes, I was right. Okay. Self-doubt is sometimes good. Because you can tell yourself you're wrong, but you're correct. We infer based on that this particular being has a wider capacity for sentience as a whole, because this evidence points to the idea that their experience are structural in terms of unified, evaluative, and effective characteristics. For instance, we might observe that some objects produce positive, negative effects in the nervous system, which the being responds to. We can infer from the activities they engage in what the ends they are striving towards are. We can read their body language and the messages they are communicating to us and to one another about their mental states. In other words, we can understand the evaluative phenomenal character of their experiences. I don't know why Shepard's being. I thought most people who believe in sentience or consciousness didn't like Shepard, because Shepard doesn't seem like the guy to endorse consciousness based arguments, phenomenal consciousness. I think Well, he said their consciousness or something like that sorts is gonna be some sort of precaution, prerequisite or something like that sorts for moral status. But Shepard, he has written so much papers against phenomenal consciousness, and some people have accused him of strawmanning sentience and strawmanning the consciousness position, are not really understanding. And some I've even read an article that said that he didn't know what moral status is in contrast with what moral value is. Uh, is the author said he misunderstands what moral value is or moral status is. That seller, I don't know. The sense in which the word has a unified structure for them in terms of certain things to be sought and to be avoided. The sense in which the world has unified structure for them in terms of to be sought. I don't know what that means. Because of this general structure, sentience is meaningfully thought of as a single capacity can be used as a common basis for internal comparison and assessment of how we treat sentient beings. Even if those sentient experiences vary because each of them can be thought of as making sense of the same thing, a being's subjective experience of this world, this by no means implies that all substantive problems of how to compare and prioritize different experiences and their impact on an individual welfare are resolved. However, however, it does mean we avoid incommensurability, incommensurability difficulties because the discrete capacities we compare when we assess a sentient being's experience are part of the same capacity. Thus, that a similar response is not available for the plurist or to the plurist. This is because a plurist can simply explain what we ought to focus on, the way particular capacities order, how we should understand our other capacities without their view collapsing in some kind of monism. The problem of complexity arises for the plurist because internal comparisons require a basis. There must be something in terms of which we should assess relative weight. We should assess an individual's different capacities. From a pluralist view, we lack this precisely because each capacity is thought to be morally fundamental. The moment one capacity order and determines the moral importance of another, it is that the capacity which is the fundamental basis of our moral assessment, and it is exactly that makes an account of sentience, sentient dignity convincing. We can account for complexity because other capacities are morally valuable in virtue of sentience being morally valuable. Any problem that might arise in accounting for complexity are therefore avoided because sentience is sole basis for dignity, and so it forms the background against which we assess and compare the value of other capacities. To be sure, this would leave certain questions open, but adopting sentient dignity provides the resources to answer those questions. Moral distinctions. Um, I'll leave it off there and like it's a cool point to stop. Moral distinctions. I don't know. I'm a predict that they might gonna talk about comparisons like in the other article they talked about soft distinctions between let's say animals and humans in the sense of looking at how let's say a dog is uniquely uh has unique experiences, etc., like sniffing, and are using their olfactory, and next was interest, uh such as how they brought up the example of B and etc., and how some beings can be wronged for derivative. You know what? I'm gonna leave it there.